Hello, and welcome. It is, of course, Worldbuilding Wednesday. So, let's build some worlds. As soon as we make sure that everything is prepared, and it is very good. So, let's get to it. As always, I'm your host, Casimir Basilius, Imperial Lord, the usual. So, today we will be world building, as it is, of course, World Building Wednesday. But, I'm minutes late. Entire minutes. I must admit, I was working on stat blocks. Not really, sort of, kind of, half. I was working on rules, more so than stat blocks. Specifically, how to put it? Heat. Temperature. Things that, basically, there are rules for environments. I know, crazy. There's different worlds with different temperatures. Absolutely insane. But basically, there was something I just realized was severely missing from the rules. It's the way it was set up is it was completely omitted from the rules. It's just not there. And, well, I couldn't have that. As some of you may know, completeness in rules is a thing I strive for. I like having the most complete possible rules, which is insane, but, that's just the way it is. So something we didn't have very specifically was temperature increase. Strangely enough, basically, it's there was no way of determining. There are rules and were rules and continue to be rules for what happens to a person in an environment that's too hot or too cold. Easy enough. If you're in an environment that's too hot or too cold, depending on how too hot or too cold it is, there are checks to be made that do certain things. For instance, if you are in a warm environment, you will get tired quicker, you will take basically non-lethal damage up to a point, then you'll start taking lethal damage, you might get heat stroke, all sorts of things like that. And then there's the opposite for cold, etc., etc. But there were no rules that specifically stated. Strangely enough, this came about because I was wondering, how quickly will the sealed environment of this tank, there was no necessarily a tank, it was a hypothetical tank, how quickly will the interior of this tank hit up if we hit it with a flamethrower? So, you know, no easy way of telling without math, I suppose. Look, I don't, I don't know air temperature increasing thermodynamics off the top of my head. So, and of course, I'm not going to do that much research. I mean, we roll dice. I have a limited number of types of dice, and things are already complex enough. But basically, I was trying to figure out a way to determine heat increase of environment. But yeah, that's it. Instead of, just, well, the temperature increases, because we can do that easily enough. The world's temperature increases, it is midday, you're in a desert, etc., etc. Easy enough. This is the ambient temperature. But when hitting something with, say, a flamethrower or a microwave weapon, how quickly does the interior of this thing heat up? Especially, I mean, innately, or if it has climate control. One of these two, basically both separate ones, but how quickly does this thing heat up? So I was working on that, and then I looked at the clock and was like, well, would you look at that? It's time. Hence, slightly late. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, it's world building time. Well, a few other things I've been working on, I suppose, is working a bit on old-timey weapons and old-timey rules. Specifically, we expanded the tech tree. It was a thought that was half had a while back when I was working on some old vehicles, specifically sort of World War II era vehicles, World War I, World War II. I was working on them, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to put point after tech level. So this is tech level 8.3, being relating to a certain year or so. 8.3, etc., etc. So from there, very recently, I expanded it out. So now there's a measurement of what each point means in regards to each era. It's not a constant, like 5 years per. It depends on the era. It goes up by a certain amount. Anyway, stuff like that, math stuff. Also, updated action dice rules, ever so slightly updated costs. Remember that action checks exist. And also, what was the other thing? Oh, yes. Action dice costs, added some better explanation for wounds, and what was it? Ah, yes. Made it so the favor system can be used without the bot. I mean, we won't use it without the bot, we run solo. But made it so the favor system can be used without the bot. Also updated with the favored system can affect, because you gain favors slightly less commonly than action dice. So we thought we'd give them a few more abilities than just adding yes, no, especially since we're going to use them without the bot too. So basically now, favors do other things. What were they? We would have to go and find it in the book. Yes. They can now, I'm not sure if I want to keep this one, but they can now add 2 dice rolls. Might get rid of that one, might not. And in addition to adding to dice rolls, which is, I think we'll keep it because it's such a small bonus. One might think, why not increase the bonus? But that's what action dice are for. And yeah, these are rarer to get than action dice, but eh. So basically, any one, you can add 2 favor points at maximum to a thing, and they'll apply a +1 or a +2 to a dice roll, depending on how many you spend up to the 2. And specifically now, they can be used, what their main use is they can be spent on dramatic editing and maybe spent to add to an action check. An action check is something you do with your action dice, sort of. It's also used for... I might get rid of the action dice used for it. Maybe. That's a hard one. So basically, an action check is sort of like a luck check. It's something that I can use to basically be like, are you lucky enough to find this thing that you're looking for, and so forth. But also they can be spent on dramatic editing, which is an action dice thing. Usually it's action dice only, but usually it costs quite a few action dice, but basically allows little conveniences to happen for action. It's like, do you happen to have what you need on hand, and stuff like that? Or does a thing show up right in time? Like, not a big saving thing, but like, you're fighting on a bridge. Does a truck happen to pass under the bridge for you to jump on at the right time? You know? Like, if there's cars going under it, like, you'd have to spend a lot to get it to just happen. But like, if it's something that's possible and reasonable, like there are cars and vehicles passing under the bridge, does a truck pass by just in time, like this turn or in a few turns and so forth? So stuff like that can be used for dramatic editing. But that's the main good thing that they can be used on, as opposed to just a +1 or +2 on rolls. They're basically for dramatic editing and spent on action checks. Specifically, I want to make sure they're spent on action checks, while action dice, I'm debating as to whether action dice should be spent on an action check. Because it feels like if I just allow action dice to innately apply as a bonus to action checks, then action dice might not be spent as often. Maybe? Which we don't want. We want action dice to be spent. But also, will it though? Will it though? Because action checks aren't something that are common. They happen basically. Let's double check. It's a passive thing. It's a passive thing, basically. It's not action check isn't decided by the player. It's decided by the GM for the most part. It's basically, does this favor the player? Is this in the player's favor? And then you can make an action check. And there's a dice roll, they add to it to see whether it succeeds or fails. Stuff like that. But we don't want players to save action dice. I mean, we sort of want them to save action dice. Action dice are a really neat system. You can use them for a bunch of things, and they regenerate every in-game day. So you also can regenerate them in a variety of other ways. But basically, we want them to be spent, but we also want them to be saved, you know? You don't want to use... I mean, they're limited, so obviously you don't want to use them on every roll. You want to use them where it matters. Like to stop an injury, or if you roll almost a hit, use an action die to ensure that's a hit. Or if there's a critical skill check, spend an action die, roll that action die, and see if whether you succeeded or not, you know? We'll give a bonus to succeeding it. Stuff like that. Or spend them to confirm a crit. That kind of thing, you know? We want them to be used, but also used strategically. As you have technically infinite action dice, but a limited number a day. Also, they're randomly awarded. So, you know, if you play a character with their traits, get an action die. Or you do something neat, gain an action die. That kind of thing. So yeah, just working on things like that. Lowering the price of certain things because nobody used dramatic editing. Maybe because they don't know it exists. I mean, it's in the book, but like, who reads the books? But also, so like, it's a bit more incentivized to use because it's powerful, but it's not super powerful. So we lowered the cost a little bit by like 1 point. So now, with just 2 action die, you can dramatic edit. The lowest level. I think the highest level is 4. Actually goes a bit higher than that, but basically. Bit better pricing on that. Updated wounds, not how they work, just clarification of them, added clarification to the player book, and decreased the price of, and clarified the rules for action dice on how to negate wounds with action dice. Decrease the price a little bit, so it's a bit easier to ignore wounds with action dice by a little bit. It's not something you necessarily want to save your action dice for, but it's not something you don't. It now takes 3 action dice to negate a wound. But, I believe, is it 3 action dice to negate a wound? Currently now, I believe it's 3 action dice to negate a wound, 1 action dice to decrease a wound penalty, and 2 action dice to not, if you fail a, whatchamacallit, a die instantly check, a massive damage save, you can spend 2 action die, convert it to a critical wound. Then I suppose you could spend an additional 1 action die to decrease that to a severe wound. And all, like I said, 3 to ignore an injury result. Which we might get rid of, might keep, not sure, have to test that out. And, yeah. Also to use, this isn't new, but they're used to ignore wound impairment for 1d4 rounds. Although we should fix that, honestly. I'm gonna actually fix that right now. It says 1d4 rounds, but I've changed it slightly to a number of rounds equal to the action die result. So you can act normally for a number of rounds equal to whatever the roll on the action die is, meaning it can now explode too. So that's nice. Which can be super useful for when you're injured, because reducing a wound by a category only works when the wound is inflicted, and it can only do it by 1 category. So you wouldn't be able to spend multiple action die to convert a critical wound to a light wound, but you would be able to basically convert a critical wound to a severe, or a severe to moderate, moderate to minor, or minor to light, basically. Only 1 step. Which I should also clarify in the book. Let's type that in there. Sorry, this is turned from world building to let's update the rule book. Can only spend 1 action die to do so. Can't spend multiple action die to lower a wound by more than one category. There we go. Okay. So if you reduce your wound, you then want to spend an action die to ignore the impairment. I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to, but basically, like, you would then ignore wound impairment for a number of rounds after you lessen the wound in case that amount is still too much, like if you're trying to do a skill check or stuff like that. Yeah. But basically, as you can see, Galactic Requiem, working on it, always working on it. Usually, we try and not work on it here when we're supposed to be world building. But like I said, you have caught me in the middle of working on these things. Or more so, I was in the middle of working on these things and realized, oh God, it's time. I have to go and do the thing. Um, so yeah, just lots of work on rules, temperatures, increasing of environment temperature, action dice, nations, always working on nation rules, um, and other rules, stuff like that. Specifically for nations, we came across a little problem. Another one, which was counting large nations as multiple, figuring out units to population, basically. Units to population has always been a bit of a problem. When I say that, I mean like you have certain stats, determining the scale at which the stats are calculated, and then seeing if there's a way to. So basically, in short, you can have your stat, right? You have your stat. The stat has a modifier of, like, technically -5 to 45. Now, this stat modifier, if positive, provides you special things. Like, for force, every positive modifier is an additional unit on the military scale that can be upgraded to level 12 as opposed to limited to level 6, I believe. So you can have better military. But it's limited to, obviously, a fraction of your population. The problem comes when it's counted per system, right? Stats are per system and or subsector. What happens if you have more, like a Dyson swarm? So you would have 22 million people at that level 12 at a Dyson swarm population for your army. It just isn't right. It's not mathematically correct. So basically, trying to figure out how to make it so the stats modifiers apply to larger civilizations that occupy the same amount of space. I mean, one could do it per population, which is one of the things we consider. Look. I'm. It's hard to talk about such things, not because it's bad to talk about. It's because my brain goes off thinking about such things and just starts wandering, and it's hard to get words out because numbers and math and concepts and all that. So basically, um, yeah, no, basically the point is, things we work on constantly. Like I said, also working on past stuff, getting better stats for actually noting down more so the stats for, like, muskets, old-timey rifles, things from things from the old days. Definitely not because I was going to also start just a personal solo campaign to test rules from, like, 1700s to 1900s. Definitely not just so I could test the quick draw gunfight rules. No, no, definitely not. Definitely not to test the quick draw gunfight rules. But I also was like, you know what? I also want to work on starting a few muskets and all that. So, yeah, that. ah, picture an Imperial force landing on a low-tech world. That wouldn't go well for the low-tech world. Oh, hey, they line up and fire the muskets. I mean, sure, that'll do something. I mean, it's not like that won't do damage. I'm just saying, it's not like it won't do damage. But, once the indirect fire guided artillery starts hitting, the battle's going to change. Um, I mean, tech doesn't stop physics. Well, mostly. An energy shield will likely stop a musket ball, don't get me wrong. It's an energy shield. It can take a few hits. It's not like it'll take damage more than likely, but a cannon hitting a person in combat armor is still a cannon. It's going to obliterate the person in combat armor. Doesn't matter that it's an old-timey weapon. Um so yeah. But tactics and all that is what are they going to do against fighter bombers and orbital bombardment? Nothing. But we're not talking about me going to one of those. I'm just going to make a random character from the era to test gunfights. Because the gunfight rules are fun. Not just like normal gunfight rules. I mean, don't get me wrong, normal gunfight rules are fun. But the quick draw Wild West gunfight rules in which, you stare down your opponent, then you quick draw, you get your shot, take a penalty or bonus based on certain things, declare certain things. Then there's like the showdown, the intimidation factor, the quick draw, the firing, and all that. And then the lovely wound system, which in one of my matches with a player was one of my favorite Old West quick draws that happened with those rules specifically because I mean, it's not like we haven't used the rules; they're just not used often because usually sci-fi, space stuff. But favorite time, player quick draws, enemy quick draws, fires off, takes a round to the leg, drops, still continues firing. Everybody just firing rounds off, and then just plus the wounds, like taking a hit to the leg, failing the save and not dying from it, but like failing the save and dropping down because you're shot in the leg, and just the quick draw plus wounds is just so good. It's so cinematic and so good when like you're just firing off revolver rounds and and the wound penalties start coming in. So like you get shot in the arm, now you have a -2 to fire back, and because you're second to shoot, because you failed in the standoff, and they did their intimidate, which lowered your roll check to initiative, and then you fail the initiative, so you get shot in the arm because they missed, because they tried to increase their speed at the penalty of accuracy to go first. Because even with the intimidate, they weren't sure that they'd go first, so they take a penalty to hit to take a bonus to initiative, get that shot off, hit your arm, -2 on your to hit, but you shoot next because you go second, and then you get the hit off, but you hit them center mass, and like just penalties start stacking, and then wounds, and like now they're having a hard time breathing because they hit in the lung, and just those visceral Wild West gunfights where, yeah, the guns are lethal, but they're Wild West guns, and they're not so they're definitely lethal. Don't get me wrong, but like you ever hear of those Wild West gunfights where two people are at not necessarily long range, not necessarily, like relatively close range, and both people are taking hits with the old timey pistols and survive. Crazily enough, they'll take like 3 hits and live. On occasion, somebody will take a hit and die instantly. But there are those cases where people are like shot 3 times and it's fine. Like not fine, fine, especially given the medicine of the time, but like survive the gunfight. Anyway, good stuff like that. But so yeah, I crave more of that. So I was considering making a solo Wild West adventure character, not for stream or anything, just for testing the systems and all that. And then that's like I said, that's when I got sidetracked, expanded the tech chart. Um, so the like tech 5.1 is different from 5.2, and just little things like that. So that's the plan to work some more on that. But that's our goal. I say goal, I mean that's what we're going to do, not us, but you know. And what else is my plan? Just a lot of formatting, adding more items to books instead of statting them as they come, statting them beforehand, just for ease of use, as opposed to only having standard stat templates. And items need to be listed out a bit better. Bunch of things, clarifying certain rules. Lots of work. A lot of file formatting still. Lots of formatting. But lots of other work. Anyway, that's not what we're here for. Let's build a world. So, we will be working on, well, the world we have been working on. Let me actually open the file. I completely forgot I didn't open the file. Oh, I'm not sure if I went over this. I think I typed it out in a post. I finally decided to use the organization sheet that I have and have had for a long time, but keep forgetting to just simply use to keep more organized notes. Um, Looking for the section. We were statting a nation? Yeah, we were statting a nation. Hmm. Forgive me. I think we'll just ramble about rules. I really, really, really got rules on the brain. Like, exceptionally so. I just can't stop thinking about working on rules. Um, Not really world building, my genuine apologies. Um, so basically, the rules for all these different things apply. Well, it's hard. Nations have stat blocks. That's what we were going over last time. Let's just get to the actual world building, go over what we were going over now, last time. So I suppose that's where we can start with our thoughts. Rules wise, if it ever appears. If it, there we go. It has appeared. One thing we need to work on, I think I explained, there's tags. I need a little bit more clarification on nation tags, but that's for quick nation calculation and all that, and as little bonus modifiers. But as you might see, buildings, projects, policies, programs, edicts, and decrees. All this. All little bonuses nations have. Basically allowing nations to have all sorts of little custom things. I want to make some pre-made ones that basically are templates and options. But the entire point of projects, policies, programs, edicts, and decrees, more so edicts and decrees, are basically, same with buildings to a degree, are things you can build on your nation that basically can provide little custom bonuses, especially edicts and decrees, like I said, are little things you can state that will give you little bonuses. The goal is to make a system that can have custom bonuses that don't get too far out of hand, you know? Because we don't want them to go too high. We don't want them to go too low. But also, there's gonna have to be a bunch of custom things, honestly, probably. Just to, I mean, I'm on the fence about custom rules. I say custom rules. I mean custom for factions, not custom for the game. Half the rules in Galactic Requiem are custom. I mean, like, so obviously, the insectoid species should have their own societal rules. This makes sense. They're insectoids. The robots of the coalition should have their own societal rules. They're robots. They're also very much a collective in certain cases. But point is, they deviate from the standard Terran template. Therefore, they should have things that cover that, as they don't follow the necessarily same rules for nation building as a Terran, especially the insectoids. Also the bots, don't get me wrong, the bots, but it's weird for the insectoid nations because they technically can control colonies of very small bugs that are like semi-sentient to a degree. So it gets weird. Like as to what you consider a pop unit and loyalty when it's a hive mind and stuff like that. But then there's nations that maybe they don't have special rules based on species. In which case, do those special rules apply nationwide? Like, are they available to other nations? Or are they just specialty things? And I'm not a fan of specialty things, unless there's a very good reason for it. But, let's be honest, the Empire, my faction, I say mine, I don't run the faction, I'm a member of the faction. But basically, we are, not sure if you can tell, a little militaristic, a little, well, indoctrinating of our society, and technology better than most, you know, stuff like that. Does the Empire get special rules? So far, no. No. We follow the standard nation rules. But should the Empire have special rules? Is the question. I mean, it's nothing another nation can't do. So theoretically, if the Empire had specialty rules, they'd be available to other nations, other than like technology. Technology is like technically available to other nations, but like in a sense of they don't have it, but it's available to them. But, like societal structure, any nation can follow imperial societal structure. That's not like a limit. But what does it fall under? Is that a project, a policy, a program, an edict, or a decree? Who knows? So those need work. Ministries are fine. We have those all set up and prepared. Could use a little bit more clarification of ministries on the organization scale, which is the slightly smaller scale than nation scale. But nations and organizations can mix. They can affect each other. There's a penalty for organizations dealing with nations and a bonus for nations dealing with organizations. But stuff like that. The difference, by the way, being one big thing that annoys me to no degree specifically is organizations earn copious amounts more money than nations. Copious amounts. But to counter that, organizations are limited in scale. Specifically, you can have a certain number of vassal organizations, and after that point, or as we call them, subsidiaries, after that point, they become independent. Subsidiaries are even independent just to a lesser degree. You get a bonus over them. But if you have more organizations, they become completely independent. And they can work with you. They can theoretically be your friends, but they could also theoretically become your enemies and can gain different management, stuff like that. Organizations can theoretically splinter, but they theoretically earn more money than a nation of the same scale as them. But they're limited to scale of up to, I believe, a maximum of 100 million people or workers in an organization before you have to basically switch over to the nation scale. I believe it's 100 million with subsidiaries. I know that without subsidiaries it's like a million, I think. With subsidiaries it's 100 million. Then you can have multiple allied organizations that are independent. Technically, like I said, subsidiaries are, but you get a bonus on controlling them. So yeah, a little bit more clarification in nation rules, stuff like that. Always working on those. Seems like that's what I've been working on for the longest amount of time now. Because they're complex. Crazily enough, shooting things is easier than running a mega corporation. Who could have guessed? Also determining whether I think the rules we have it set is medieval, like kingdoms use organization rules as opposed to nation rules, just because the scale is so small. Although I suppose a much larger, like medieval civilization could use nation rules of the smallest scale. I believe the smallest scale nation rules have a million? A million people per pop unit? I don't know. I may write the rules, doesn't mean I know them off the top of my head. I believe the smallest nation scale is a million people per unit, so you need at least a million people to have the smallest pop scale, while the largest organization scale is a million people, other than getting subsidiaries and getting it up to 100 million, but subsidiaries only pay you a tenth of their earnings in taxes, I believe. Let's double check. Okay. The holding company can have a total of 10 subsidiaries. A subsidiary can have a number of 5 second-tier subsidiaries. A second-tier subsidiary can have 2 third-tier subsidiaries. And a third-tier subsidiary can have no subsidiaries of its own. I wonder if that is also listed under vassals. Because nations can have vassals, but I'm not sure what the... No, vassals can theoretically, aren't limited like subsidiaries. vassal nations can theoretically have as many vassals as they want, up to, what their superior nation allows them. Um, yeah, stuff like that. Oh, we clarified. I think I brought this up last time. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Why you wouldn't use military as elite units, because the stats are worse. Even a base worker unit has 6 in their stats. I say 6, I mean on like a dice roll, while a military unit has 4 or less to getting things done that aren't military related, which is why you want specialty units as opposed to just military units. Thought I'd clarify that. I mean, it's not like a military unit can't get things done. They can. It's just going to be less efficient to send a military unit to do something than just sending a standard unit. Although it might be cheaper. That's a question. Let's find out the answer. Technically, no. Because you can you can raise a worker unit for free, basically. Just making an action check. Yeah. A 1,000. And you can do that. So even at base, let's do a little bit of math. Sorry. 55,000. That is at base times 1,000. Gives us 55 million. Divided by 100,000. So you could send 550 550,000 basic workers. Really? So 550,000 workers. So you could send a military unit on the Empire scale um, out for basically free every month, as opposed to spending one space buck. I suppose you could just spend the value, technically speaking. I should note that somewhere. Because that's a force check. You could always just hire people to do it. Hmm. I suppose you'd just make a military check for that, wouldn't you? Or specifically just use a military unit. You could. Hmm. Thinking about rules and how to implement them. The stream. Um, this is the kind of things we think about every day. That and running a nation. Um, so let's actually assign some points to this government. Why not? Seeing as we can put a maximum of 23? Well, not really. It's assumed we just have a 10 in each skill unless we want to be more fancy with it. How many would that be, out of curiosity? Hmm. More than we should have. But more than what's listed there. That's weird. Anyway, it's fine. It's for quick calculation. Ooh. Sorry, I just come up with a new idea. I just thought of a world tag. Let's go to our chart of world tags. Where did I put those? World tags, here we are. They're already half listed as existing as tags. But we might as well add, like, they're a bit redundant. Sure. Where is it? I'm missing one now, it looks like. Well, we can always search for it in words. Ship. This section of book isn't even really related to ships. I have 105 instances of the word ship. Not ideal. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I assume they should all be there. Yep, there it is. Okay. We'll add two descriptors that are a bit redundant, but we'll add strong economy and weak economy. Why not? As you may know, we have rules for different things in regards to... Wait, I should move it to there. Hub. So there are different system types, of course. There's producers, refiners, hubs, transits, and consumers. Basically, it basically is used to determine the amount of... what's the word I'm looking for? Production. The amount of goods that are rolled for a world, and to also describe the world in a little sense. For instance, a producer system has plus 2d6 exports. A refiner system has 1d6 additional imports and 1d6 additional exports. A hub has increased ship traffic. Transit system is standard. It means it doesn't necessarily, but don't get me wrong, a transit system doesn't mean like they're not selling there. It just means it's not like it's taking a lot of resources. And a consumer system has plus 2d6 imports. But basically they're used in our trade, I believe the word is. Yeah, our trade rules for, every world theoretically has an import and an export. Well, there's several imports and exports that affect their economy to see whether it is, when I'm making a check to see whether a world's economy has that item's base price modifier. But also for shipping, if you want to ever play a shipping campaign, there's rules for that to determine, what are the trade goods of this planet, what are their imports, what are their exports, so you know whether you want to buy there or sell there and so forth. And then, economic factors that affect that based on. Sometimes I say, hey, look at those traveler sense rules for vision RGB color variation. And then I start rambling about trade goods and imports and exports and galactic economy and how the galactic stock market is changing. And then I realize, maybe I shouldn't say that Traveler went too far with their vision rules. Maybe I should look at my own trade rules and then take a few steps back. Economy. Yeah. I suppose that's what we should add to this world. Where will we find that? I noted it. Good, perfect, I did. Info. This system is a. What is it? Open the other book. This system is not a major producer of goods. It's not a major refiner. It's not a transit system, even though people do go through it. It is technically considered, I think we'll consider this system a hub. Increased ship traffic as it's the only connecting point between two other areas. So, this will be listed as a system trade type hub. Has increased ship traffic. Now, also, that's not only for systems. These tags and stuff apply sub-system level. So technically, every planet, or object more so than planet, in the system, other than the star, I suppose, unless people are in stations around it, can also have a trade type. So we could have one of these worlds is a refining world and so forth, basically indicating that the inflow and outflow of goods and items from each individual location. You can do that. But it can also go sub that even, sub object. You can make it like city based, like this city imports and exports. You can go all the way down to there. Or nation scale, like which nation does this and that. As you can see here, we have 5 nations, but like basically we can indicate what each imports and exports to modify roles and all that if we wanted. You can go up and down in scale in that, which is real neat. Generally, you're not supposed to go up in scale. When I say that, I mean like every every system should have its thing. Technically, you could go subsector, but you're not supposed to. You should do each individual system. But you could do subsector. You're not supposed to go up in scale. But going down in scale is well doable. Going up in scale is doable. It's just the rules aren't meant for that. You can, but they're not meant for that. Going down in scale, they're meant for that. You can even go down to the organization scale to see what they produce, like at that point you're just using organization scale, but like, specifically like cities. You can also like theoretically go businesses, which is organization scale, to see what a business is buying and selling, but that's less it's not meant for that. You can, but it's really not meant for that. You're pushing the rules to the extreme at that point. Like it's not going to work well. But I'm fine with it not working at that scale. Like we don't need it to work at that scale. It's not built for that. So, yeah. Oh, I suppose I was working on the wrong sheet. Basically here, I know that the system's trade hub type is, well, the system's trade type is hub and has increased ship traffic. I suppose we'll also note that the system has two FTL lanes that connect two sides of a subsector, which I think we went over before. Let's check. That be this map? Yep, the idea was that this is going to do so. Let's actually solidify that fact. To do that, we're gonna go to Frontier. Draw, explore, object. Yep. Get properties. Now let's go back over to East 40. And let's finally object. Solidify. No. No snap. Solidify the fact that this system is the only thing connecting these two. These sides are not connected. And I suppose we should, like, as we've already started, make the connection. There we go. Now we have lanes of FTL. Crazy that. Sure. So here are our, I mean, we could also go crazy. We could go absolutely crazy, but we're not going to. We'd also have to, at some point, work on the sectors around it. But we have the basics of our lanes in this subsector. I think this is how we'll have this subsector set up. One connection through, making this system rather important. These will all likely connect to other things over here, and up here. Maybe even down here. Maybe diagonally. Who knows? But basically, now we have our little FTL lanes. Oh, wrong thing, that. So that's another step done. I should. This is going to be a little bit boring, but it's something I should do. 3, 10. I hit the wrong button again. 3, 10. To 3, 10, and the other one is 15, 8. Sublocation 15, 8. Sublocation 3, 10. I suppose we should also note location. What are the rules on that? How do we note location? That would be in our lore book. Astronomical catalog. Up, down, then left, right. Good, good. Up, down, then left, right. North 1, west 8. North 1, west 8. Make sure I did that right. Yep. Oh, and the number of light years it is. 8 light years. Is there another arrow before that? Yes. LY 8. Welcome to mapped identification. East 4, North 3. North 3, East 4. North 3, East 4. Light years? 5. And that's how you, well, system coordinates and FTL lane. Isn't that slow and annoying? But that's how you get FTL lane locations. If you want to know what I did, I just went East 4, North 3, and then measured the distance, 5. And for the other one, North 1, West 8. 8 light years. And that's how you map FTL lanes. It's a bit harder if it's, say, over here. Because then you give another chain code of the subsector location. And then you give the location of the location in that subsector to get the full location. Yeah. That's how that all works. So we've mapped the FTL lanes of this subsector. This, of course, being a subsector. Every square being a light year. A subsector being 15 by 15 light years. And a sector being 10 by 10 subsectors for a total of 100 subsectors and about 150 light years across, because 15 times 10, yes. So that's, I think we're going to call it there. It's a bit early, far earlier than usual, but I'm gonna go make coffee, and then I'm gonna go and stare at these sheets and do what we just did, which is work on rules for quite a while. Probably until I go insane. Yes, until I go insane. And slowly we'll make progress. Next time is gonna be Worldbuilding. No, today's Worldbuilding Wednesday. Next is gonna be on Friday. We're going to play our solo tabletop RPG. We'll try and do more in-depth world building next Worldbuilding Wednesday, as opposed to rule stuff, actual world building. more armor on Saturday, probably, and another special project coming up. We might also eventually get another episode of the news prepared. But other than that, there's an additional special project. So hopefully that gets done at some point. And then, yeah, well, as usual, I've been your host, Cosmo Basilius, and I hope that you, yes, you, have had and are having and will have a wonderful day.